Well, welcome to this wonderful presentation by Why Size Doesn't Matter, and that's organization size. Thank you very much. PMOs in independent community health systems, so that's an important thing. Both Ashley Denter, who is the Director of Change Management at Vail Health, and Susan Ibanez, Chief Information Officer from Vail Health as well, will be teaching this class. So enjoy and please welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ashley Dentler, and I am the Director of our Project Management Office at Vail Health. And presenting with me today is Susan, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Ibanez. I'm the Chief Information Officer with Vail Health. Ashley and I are so excited to be here today to present our topic, Why Size Doesn't Matter, Building a Project Management Office in an Independent Community Hospital. It's been a very exciting journey, and I hope you guys enjoy listening to how we got to where we are.
All right, so before we get started, we figured we'd tell you a little bit about ourselves. So who is Vail Health? We are a health system that was established in 1965. We're a not-for-profit community healthcare system. And some of the services that we include are world-renowned orthopedics. And if you guys are familiar with our Vail Summit Orthopedic and Neurosurgery Group, and some of you may know the Steadman Philippon Research Institute and Steadman Clinic. We have physical, occupational, and speech therapy with our Howard Head Sports Medicine Group. We have emergency and trauma services with Surgical Associates. We have oncology care through the Shaw Cancer Center, as well as behavioral health through our Eagle Valley Behavioral Health Coalition. We have primary care services through Colorado Mountain Medical, as well as cardiology, internal medicine, ambulatory and outpatient services through our Vail Health clinics, as well as our Vail Valley Surgery Center. So a little bit more about us. We are pretty small. We're only a 56-bed, level 3 trauma facility. We have 3 ambulatory surgery centers for outpatient surgeries, and we have over 1,300 employees. We see about 13,000 patients a year for our inpatient areas, as well as about 7,000 primary and telehealth visits and 7,000 surgeries a year. If you're familiar with healthcare systems, we have a payer mix of 53% commercial, 35% Medicare, about 7.5% Medicaid, and then 4% self-pay. But the reason that I bring this up is because if you notice, we really don't have a whole lot of volume, but we're very seasonal where we are. We're fortunate enough to live and be situated right at the base of Vail Mountain if you like to ski or snowboard. But because of that, we have a seasonality influx both in our summer and in our winter seasons. So the volume that you're seeing here is really kind of shouldered into a very tight time window. I bring that up because the opposite seasons is really when we see our growth. It's our opportunity for our projects to kick off and to execute. And if any of you guys know tight couplings, don't book your flights too close together because you're probably not going to make it. So for us, we really needed to execute on our projects in a really small window. So as you can see, despite the fact that we've got very short periods of time to do this, we still have expanded. We're now in our Eagle County region, our Summit County region, and we're in Pitkin County as well. But we needed a way to maybe formalize our project management, which previously we never had. So Susan's going to talk through a little bit here about where we were and now where we are today.
Thanks, Ash. So as Ashley was mentioning, project management, formal project management is very new to Vail Health. This was something that we brought to the organization really just in January of 2021. So it's almost amazing to see, because I've worked in project management organizations and many other companies before. So to me, it's astounding that we've been able to go from January to now and establish a project management office with the maturity and structure that we've got in place. So we're incredibly blessed to be able to do that. So before January of 2021, Vail Health really had no centralized project management processes, methodology, none of that framework. We didn't have great resource coordination across the organization either, and resources are pulled for the same project, the same resources are pulled from multiple projects across the organization. We didn't have a lot of organizational transparency. There was really no global visibility into what was going on across the organization. We had no project transparency. One department didn't know what another department was doing, and so it could lead to duplication of projects. We didn't have a great standardized method for measuring ROIs and KPIs, so there wasn't a good way to know if we were getting the value out of the projects that we were undertaking. Also, we didn't have strong project governance or a project management office. So the governance that we did have in place was a committee that we called the IT Steering Committee. As you can guess, very IT-centric, but there were still a lot of projects. When I joined the organization about 14 months ago, there were 200 to 250 projects lined up outside the IT doors that were waiting to be implemented. So that was between 2019 and 2020. We had one lonely IT project manager who was responsible for running all of the projects within IT, but still very IT-centric. So not enterprise project management. And we only really managed the IT portion of the project. So what about the rest of the projects? So you may be asking why we would want to establish a project management office in a 56-bed hospital. I kind of asked myself the same thing when I took the job. How busy could they be? They've only got 56 beds. But there's a lot more behind the scenes that goes on at Vail Health. So really, this connects us to what our theme is for the entire PMO symposium, Diamonds Made Under Pressure. We had to come up with a way to help our organization get a grip on all of these projects that were coming in, make sure that the projects were the right projects that we should be undertaking. We needed a way to organize projects that were occurring in our organization. We needed to break down departmental silos because they exist in every organization. We needed to make sure that resources that were the same resources that were being required for every project were available and accountable, and we needed to make sure that we could drive for success in execution of these projects. So just to give you a little bit of the backstory behind what was going on at this time at Vail Health, 2.5 years ago, we got a brand new CEO. The organization was going through a lot of transformation, changing from a truly small community hospital to more of an enterprise system. We were an entirely new leadership team, from CEO down to director level. So there was an opportunity to really shake up the Yahtzee Cup, to really put something in place that could help them. So as we all know, in every organization, not just small organizations, excuse me, resources are very scarce and they wear a lot of hats. So the same resource may be pulled in a variety of different directions. So there were no shortage of good ideas. Many projects come from great ideas out in the field, but are they the right projects that we should be undertaking? So we had to make sure that as we selected the projects that we worked on, that they aligned with strategic initiatives, either patient safety, regulatory, were we doing the right projects for the right reason that would really move the needle within the organization. One of the things we wanted was to make sure that project management became a force multiplier to help the operational departments. And lastly, project management helps support small organizations by keeping them agile and helping them stay competitive in this very competitive healthcare market, because as you know, in healthcare, independent hospitals don't really last very long. They're either gobbled up by larger corporations unless they can find a way to stay fiercely independent.
So really during our discussion today, as you've seen a little bit of our history of where we were and where we are now, is we want to talk you through our story of the journey that we've taken. But what I would like to mention is that ultimately we're here to do project execution, and it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. So we hope that the concepts that we're going to share with you and how we sold it to a small organization, the idea of building a PMO, who you actually need to build it, how we went about building it, and how we're continuing to prove success resonates with some of you in the audience. So to start us off, we're going to talk about how did we sell this idea where we've never had structured project management before, especially in a small organization. So we took the opportunity to highlight some of the areas where we really needed some help. We took 3 approaches. 1, we needed governance and strategic alignment. We needed a one-stop shop for automation for projects to come in and to be executed. And we also needed a centralized resource center so that we knew where we were spending our time, our money, and our people. So to start off with the governance and strategic alignment, in healthcare and in many other organizations and industries, the segments are siloed. The departments are arguably looking to take care of themselves and their internal needs, and that's really where their attention is focused. So we needed to create a governance committee that was going to provide full transparency of what we're doing, what projects are we undertaking, and how are we going to do this collaboratively. So as an idea, you start a project and you need your primary project team. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Give us 1 second here, we lost our presentation. I can still talk you through it. So
Yeah,
the idea of where we start with the project is you have a great idea. You have your core team, and if you remember, up there, was it over there? That's okay. Hands off. So when you start off with a project, you have your core team, and as I had displayed on the slide, it might be in a healthcare system, you need your admissions team, you might need your finance team, and you might need some clinical teams. And then maybe down the road, you might need a little bit of your IT team, you might need some facilities. But before this, they weren't really connected. They all kind of were on their own. So projects then collaborate all of these different silos together. Further down the road, you say, oh shoot, we're halfway through this project. We didn't even think about supply chain, and they're a huge component. And oh wait, even further, we get to data and reporting, and we didn't bring them in. So if you're able to bring in and identify your stakeholders early on in the game, you're gonna break down your silos, and this is how we sold this idea across our organization, where our departments were involved in projects, many of them, but not early enough on where they could be collaborative and successful together. So Susan will go through one of the other opportunities that we saw, which was creating that automated one-stop shop.
Thanks, Ash. So one of the objectives that we had was in selling this project management office was proving the value of it. In order to get buy-in and to get engagement, we had to make it simple. We had to make it a one-stop shop. I couldn't put in a process that took 27 steps, never knowing where to go, to get people to embrace this concept of project management. I didn't want to bury it in bureaucracy. So when we went with this one-stop shop approach, what we started with was, again, looking at it, you want the Walmart experience. You want to be able to go in and get your hair cut, your nails done, your eyes examined, and get your groceries. So we want a one-stop shopping experience for our customers. So in the review process, our PMO and I-team leaders review all projects with the business owners as they are submitted into our intake, which is actually just one link on our SharePoint for all our projects. So we made it a one-stop shop to submit it. We have consistent resources that work with the business owners from start to finish. The project team is the same team. One of them will be assigned, and they'll go through implementation and execution. The Project Governance Council is a consistent body that votes on projects and approves them, identifies priority and funding for the project. In the execution, the same project team members that worked with them at the beginning go through execution and implementation with them, using standardized tools, forms, and processes so that the customer experience is very consistent through the whole process.
So the last perspective we took to try to sell the PMO in our small organization was this centralized resource center. So we really wanted a way to be able to say, how are we spending our most valuable resource, which is our people, and then our time, and then our money. As we know, our people are the ones that are most valuable. How are we going to put them into projects? Can we make sure that they're still supporting their departments appropriately? And do we have a way of seeing that across the enterprise? For timelines, we needed to make sure if we're undertaking a project, how do they bump up against some of the other ones that might be in flight? And if we didn't have a centralized way of being able to monitor that, we could put some of our projects at risk for their critical milestones. For money, we always have to worry about the money from a twofold perspective. One, if you present a project and we're going to approve it, do we have it budgeted? Do we have the money to launch? And then also, if we have established PMOs, we can have the PMs inside a project actually manage them and make sure that they are staying on budget. And then the operational constraints. We all know in small organizations or even large organizations, you're pulling from the same resource pool. So if you have operations teams that say, we can't take this on right now, we now have a centralized way of being able to track that. So Susan's going to continue to provide the next level of how we ended up building our own PMO by saying, who do we actually need to do this?
So this was a fun one. It was really important to identify the members that would be a part of our project teams, and that's not just in the project management office, but across the enterprise. So we established our PMO as a supportive PMO, not a governing PMO. So consequently, we have our Project Governance Council, which actually votes and approves on the projects. But the Project Management Office supports them. The structure that we went with, our PMO reports directly to me as the CIO. Sometimes you see in organizations, they may report to business development, or they may report to different areas. I've seen it a couple of different ways, but in our organization, it worked well to put it in IT. We have a director, which is Ashley. I'm very fortunate to have Ashley as a director of our project management office. Ashley is not only responsible for oversight of all the projects that the PMO manages, she's responsible for the staff. She's also responsible for developing the strategy and structure of the project management office. She built the structure of the project governance committee, and Ashley's a working director. So she manages tier 1 programs and projects, as well as all the staff. We also have, remember I told you about the one lonely, hardworking project manager? Well, that project manager is fortunately still with our team. She's in the role of a senior manager, and the difference in her role is she can be a people manager. Your structure can look different, it just depends on what works for your organization. But this was one that worked really well for us because we were able to take what we had initially and kind of roll it into our career ladder. So then we have in our project manager group, we have a variety of PM1s and PM2s, depending on their level of expertise. They all have a different variety of skill sets. I have a technical person, I have a clinical person, we have an application person, but they're all able to manage projects in any area, even though they have their area of expertise. And then they use their phone a friend to call and ask when they have questions, and they support each other really well. A really cool role that we have that not all PMOs have, but if you can get it, I would highly recommend it, is the project coordinator. The project coordinator is the entry level into our PMO. They are really running blocking and tackling for everyone else in the PMO. They can take minutes, they can facilitate meetings, they can run reports, they help Ashley with the SOP documentation. It's just a really valuable position if you can get it. So then in our governance structure, since we're a supportive PMO, which you'll hear me say like about 150 times, instead of a governing PMO, our governance structure, as we mentioned, is the Project Governance Council. That council is made up of, as part of our transparency goal, executive sponsors, executive stakeholders from across the different segments of the organization. Those are voting members. We also have operational owners in that meeting, our project managers, and what we call solution partners, which is our IT business relationship owner for those different areas. The Project Management Office and the PGC interact together, and they work on submitting our business cases that are presented to PGC. Again, that PGC is multidisciplinary. Projects are scored and prioritized, and we'll show you a couple of the tools that we use for that.
So you've heard us talk a little bit about PGC. That stands for Project Governance Council, but I'll give you a little bit of history of where this came from. So prior, as Susan had alluded to, we had an Information Technology Steering Committee, which was really a vetting committee of all of the IT projects that were lined up at the door, first come, first serve basis, and they stacked up. So we originally had ITSC. We also had what we call the Patient Financial Journey Committee, which looked at projects from the perspective of, if we're investing our people and our time and our money, are we making sure that this is actually moving the needle for our patients to have a better experience, both overall, but from their financial journey in healthcare? As if many of you have experienced, sometimes the financial world of healthcare is not that fun to navigate. So we had these two different committees that were working kind of in tandem, but not necessarily together, and decided, well, in order to do this more collaboratively across the enterprise, let's marry them, which is where we came with the Project Governance Council idea. So what does this now new committee do? We look at this from a more powerful lens, where we've married these two groups so we can take and evaluate projects through the perspective of, are we really moving the needle for our patients' experience to be better if we're going to take this project on? We're also making sure that if we're going to take on a project, is it aligning with our organization's strategic goals? What are we trying to achieve as a healthcare system in our community and at large? We also make sure that we use this committee to do a value analysis. Again, the time, the money, the people. Do we have it? Should we undertake it? As well as this committee allows us to do some collaborative prioritization. Not only are we bringing a multidisciplinary approach to which projects we're selecting, but we're also asking that committee to decide how important is this to do right now? How urgent is it? And we also have the opportunity to look at this from an enterprise level to say, let's decrease the duplication of efforts, and let's take a project and say, what other areas in the organization could be beneficial to implement this? So Susan will now talk you through some of the actual individual roles of PGC.
Yeah, it was interesting, as Ashley mentioned, the PGC and the patient experience, coming together, because in healthcare, as many of you may know, the entire industry of healthcare is shifting to customer focused. So we're almost moving more towards retail and hospitality industry, because the patients can make different choices for their healthcare now. So we have a different focus. So it made a lot of sense in our organization to bring those two teams together, as well as there were many committee members that were on both teams. So they were getting a lot of the same information, same types of projects. So it made a lot of sense for us to bring them together. So as we mentioned, we have a shared PMO. Again, it's supportive. I should get a mark for every time I say that. So let's talk about the responsibilities of the PGC and how we present business cases and projects and how they're scored in priority. So first of all, our projects start with a business case. This is really important because it's built by the business owner or the executive sponsor of that segment. And the reason that I say that is so important is because, I'm going to jump ahead on my notes, but a lot of times projects were all considered IT projects because they had an IT component. So we want to make sure that we're aligning the project with the business unit that it actually reports to. So again, our projects start with a business case. It's important that the executive sponsor over that segment is aware that this business case is being submitted, because they really need to accept and agree that it's part of their portfolio. We can't just lob it over the fence and so say, oh yeah, nursing is going to take on this project, unless the CNO agrees to take it on. So then projects are vetted and evaluated to make sure that they're in alignment with our strategic initiatives, with a regulatory requirement, with patient safety or a new business unit. If they're not, they probably shouldn't be considered and made part of the portfolio. We score our projects for a timeline priority. When do they have to fit in the current projects that are coming up? We also score them using a tool called 9-Block, which you're probably familiar with, but Ashley will show you that as well. We use a 9-Block tool to evaluate benefit and work effort, so we can see what it's going to take to accomplish that project. Then we evaluate it and present cost, budget, and financial information, because that's really a critical part. It may be a great idea, but if we can't fund it, or we don't have the funding secured, we probably will not be able to take it on. And then finally, we talk about desired project timeline. But remember, it's very important to set the expectation. Just because the project gets approved in PGC does not mean it starts when the meeting is over. So it's really important to say that. So this is an example of the slide that we put together. There's a Word document that goes along with it. But in the PGC, the executive sponsor or business owner submitting that project brings this information. It seems like it's just one slide, but there's a lot of work that goes into this. As Damon John mentioned this morning, you've got to do your homework. You need to know what your finances are, what it's going to cost. You'll notice that's in the middle section. The project scope, the description of the solution, the value. Over on the right-hand side, that's our 9-Block. So there's a grid that goes along with developing it. Typically, you're going to be looking at your 1s, 2s, or 3s. You probably wouldn't be spending your efforts on your 4s and 5s. This is a sample, probably one of the most important documents, the Performa. The business owner has to put together their financial slide so that we can present what it's really going to cost the organization. And again, it's even more important to show ongoing cost, because like a software application may have maintenance, hardware, etc. So it's really important to talk about that.
The last document that we ask for our PGC committee to do is to take our priority scorecard and bump it up against the projects that have just been presented. So the 4 categories that we will score our projects in, because we're from a healthcare organization, is number 1 is patient and employee safety. We also have a finance component, regulatory and compliance, and then also process improvement and efficiency. If a project is going to score and it doesn't even make it down further in the scorecard because it is a patient or employee safety issue, we're likely going to have that project pass go. It's going to hit a high priority, and we're going to look at finding the time to implement that immediately. If there's a finance or regulatory and compliance component that project is going to be implementing, they typically are married in healthcare, not always, but oftentimes if there's a regulatory or compliance issue we're trying to address, there's a financial fee too. So we have them weighted the same on our scorecard. And then we have our process improvement and efficiency scoring. It's not to say that it's not important if it's going to be a project that addresses efficiencies, but it's just not going to be weighted as heavily as if it were to be a patient or employee safety issue. So once each one of these projects has gone through the scorecard and our PGC committee has decided that's the score that it gets, it gives us either a high, a medium, or a low priority to be able to then slate it for when we're going to kick off a project.
And if I could just add, this project priority scorecard was a collaborative effort between Ashley and I and our CFO. You know, he said, because CFOs do, quantify it for me. What does it mean? Just because a business owner says it's high, everybody thinks their baby is beautiful. So we needed to be able to quantify the information that was coming in to actually show that based on these things that are important in a healthcare environment in many organizations, that it had a priority of a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3.
So to continue on with the who do you need for your team, I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. This is just our approach of how we've created our project team for our organization, but we hope that this is something that may be applicable to all of you as well. Susan will start off by giving a little bit of the details of the responsibilities of our executive sponsor.
Yep, and all those roles are important and they all work together as part of the project team. One of the most important roles and sometimes overlooked is the executive sponsor. Again, I mentioned that a lot of times organizations will say, oh, it's an IT application, it's an IT project. But a pure play IT project would be something like an infrastructure or network upgrade. So the executive sponsor is a critical role in project management. In our organization, we identify the executive sponsor as the highest ranking official over that business unit. So that's going to be the person that the buck stops there. That's the person that owns the project. As a note, sorry. So that executive sponsor is responsible for obtaining funding with the operational owners. They're responsible for working with other leaders in a governance role to set expectations. One of the big expectations is resources from your departments will be required to implement this project. So that's a big one. They make key decision makers, they remove obstacles. They're really a barrier buster for the project to help the project get to the execution point. And then another role is the operational owner. The operational owner plays a big role in a project. They're probably a director or a manager or an operations person within the department that the project is running under. They help define for the business case the solution objective, what problem are we trying to solve. They help us identify metrics and statistics that will measure success. They help us identify financial impact, funding, implementation options. The list goes on, and then they work with a solution partner, building the business case, completing the portfolio, presenting, doing the 9-block score, things like that. And then finally, they also have to identify resources within the operational departments in their own department to help execute on this project. And then stakeholders. I was listening to a presentation just a moment ago, and they were talking about stakeholder engagement, a key factor in the success of a project. So as we all know, it's not just a healthcare thing, but stakeholders are any individuals, groups, or functional areas that could be either internal or external to the organization. In our world, it could be patients, the community, the board of directors, obviously a variety of people that have a vested interest in the outcome of the project.
Thank you, Susan. So now we get to talk about the project managers. Many of us in this room probably know this role very intimately, but the project managers are really responsible for the facilitation of the project and its charter. They work collaboratively across the project team, which could be executive stakeholders, it could be operational owners, and they really are the relationship owner during a project's life cycle. They manage the day-to-day activities, making sure that they're meeting the deliverables, and balancing that time and scope, especially making sure that we're hitting the expectations of the stakeholders and the project team themselves. We also try to implement our project managers to use the standardized processes and templates that we've established so that when we're producing these documents in our organization, everyone that sees them knows where they're coming from, and they have a level of expectation of what they're going to receive from our PMs. As we talked about a little bit earlier, we also have solution partners. We're fortunate enough to have several of our solution partners in our IT department that have been aligned with many of the segments in our healthcare organizations. So they actually are some of the subject matter experts, and they own the relationships with many of the people that are in the operational departments. They really are a fantastic conduit for our project success. And then lastly, to wrap up, for us, we know that there's going to be internal and external resources that are going to be utilized in a full project team to help us complete on the deliverables and see a project to success. So Susan will start now going through the next part of our journey and our story, moving from not only who do we need, but how did we actually go about doing this as of January, and we're now standing here in August.
So we sold it. Now we got what we asked for. Now we have to identify the project team members that will be part of that. So I'm going to focus on the purple part of this slide and talk about our goal being organizational transparency and visibility. Of course, we used the Project Governance Council. We actually utilized that group to be able to vet projects. Again, the executive sponsor presents them. They have buy-in. That's their story. They tell the story. In our executive leadership team, which is our senior executives in the organization, I communicate to them once a month. We have bi-weekly meetings, but I share once a month an enterprise Gantt chart showing all the projects that are going on in the organization, calling out any escalations that we need. We also use that team to help us prioritize projects that are non-negotiable. I have 200 projects. I've got 50 of them that are running right now. If we want to successfully execute on this one, like our new Dillon office, we're going to need to shift some things around. And so I use that group to be my voting members to help me prioritize the pipeline. Then we use, Ashley and I participate in monthly segment meetings with the executive owners of the business units. So we meet with the CFO and the CNO and the other executive leaders, and we talk to them about the projects in their particular portfolio. We talk about any new projects because selfishly in IT, sometimes we're the last people to know about a project that's coming down the pipeline and it has a huge IT component. So we try to use that as a connection point to get ahead of the game. What are you thinking about? What do you have in your 22 budget? What do you have here? Is there any pain point that you're trying to work on? We're also looking for duplication of projects. Just last week, I found out that 2 different units, unbeknownst to me as the CIO or the Director of Project Management, had heard about these 2 initiatives that were running in 2 different departments, same solution, different vendors. So we want to try to get ahead of that, and that's an ongoing communication and relationship building with each one of those departments. We also, thanks to Ashley and her magnificent team, we produce a monthly CEO portfolio. It's a portfolio of all the projects in the organization, where they are in status. We do a little Reader's Digest first page for each segment. We break them down by a senior leadership member, and then he can at a glance look at the key things that I need him to know about the projects, but then we can talk about each one of the projects or anyone he has interest in or wants to know what's going on. That's been very successful.
So to dive a little bit deeper into the actual activities of the project management office, we just started in January and we had to start from scratch. So the first thing we decided to do is we needed to make some standardized operating procedures for our own team members. And as you guys have heard in some other of the talks this morning, the way to do this is to actually engage the team members to write their standard operating procedures for themselves. So what did we do? We wrote our own vision and mission statement. We have one for the organization, which we aligned with, but we wanted to make sure that what we were deciding is going to be our vision and mission for the PMO was going to be how we conducted ourselves in the organization. We also wrote our own roles and responsibilities. You saw our positions and our titles, but we really needed to define what does that look like when we're out there doing boots on the ground work. We also created our own code of conduct because we really wanted to brand ourselves, be professionals in our organization, so that we're putting out products that is seen as a very weighted document, and I need to pay attention to this. In the nitty-gritty of the actual projects themselves, we don't have a lack of really great ideas and projects that are coming into us, but we needed a way to categorize them. So we created two categories between PM managed projects, which are some of those larger, those bigger tier projects. And we also have a category of PM monitored projects where really our operations teams are the ones that are running them, and our PMs are doing status checks and checking in on how is it going, can we help you? We also then decided we needed some standardized project execution. How are we going to go from beginning to end? And one of the ways we did that was through standardized templates, emails, and status reports that now we use on a regular basis. So the next thing that we did was we needed to educate our organization about, well, what is a PMO? And well, wait a minute, don't projects just get brought into PMO and then it gets spit out and it's done?
And my favorite is, do the project managers do all the work? So as an operation leader, do I just turn it over to the PMO and then it magically gets done and I don't have to do anything? No.
We all know that's not the case. So many of you have understood that this is a pain point for us, where for our organization, there hasn't been any structure for project management and has no knowledge of the life cycle that a project really takes. So we use this document that you're seeing here as a means to provide at the beginning of any project that goes and kicks off, this is what we're going to do, everybody. We're going to work together, not just PMs, to accomplish these 3 phases. So you can see it's broken down into your project intake and all the activities that have to occur in order to get it approved. In the second section there, or phase 2, it's really the meat of the project activities. Once it kicks off, this is really what we're working on. But as many of you have probably experienced as well, just because you hit a go live doesn't mean that it's actually done. So the last section is really that closure and that sign-off section of a project's life cycle, where you're then being able to say, yes, we've met our objectives. Oh wait, what lessons learned did we bring forward and what can we do better in the future? And then also making sure that we have a way to be able to have a knowledge archive, so we put all of our documents in a place where we can go back to them for future reference, especially for lessons learned.
Just a quick to add to what Ashley's saying, one of the biggest learning goals that we had in this organization and any organization that is not used to project management is that a project has a beginning and an end. If it doesn't have a beginning and an end, it is not a project, it is operations. So the way I shared that with our executive team is in the book of Genesis in the Bible, it says a project has a beginning and an end, and if it doesn't have an end, it's not a project. And so we got a good giggle and they talked about it, and still we have to remind people, there's no end to this. This is operation. So we have that, you know, it's a mindset change. And so Ashley and her team have done a great job kind of sharing that message.
Thanks, Susan. So one of the other things I alluded to here, and this is definitely not the exhaustive list, but we templatized what we did. Wash, rinse, repeat. Susan has ingrained that in my brain. Wash, rinse, repeat, templatize, standardize as much as possible. So we've created and spent a lot of time making these documents so that they're easy to grab and pull and then throw out there for whatever project that you might be working on.
Yeah, and it gives the customers a consistent experience. They know what their kickoff agendas are going to look like, their project plans will look like, their biweekly statuses, their email templates, everything looks the same, so it's consistent.
So one of the examples here, I actually did this earlier this morning during one of the talks, I apologize, but you'll see an example of the biweekly status reports that we put out for all of our PM managed projects, which are those bigger scope, longer term projects, where you'll see a report of some of the project summary, the PM narrative, which is kind of the Cliff Notes version of this is what we're doing and where we are today, and some of the next steps and action items, as well as at the top, you'll see the executive sponsor. You'll see who is the project manager, who is involved in this project for a team, and what's the date, because we have to make sure that we're relevant in time. You also see on the right-hand side there is a templatized, standardized email. So when you receive this weekly status report, you're gonna know this is who it came from, this is exactly what it is, here's the date, and how do I get to it. Another example, we showed this earlier, but this is the ROI, the performa. You're going to see this every single time, so that not only do the PMs have a standard template to use, but the organization starts to become very familiar with this, and they've done it before. It becomes second nature. As Susan mentioned, she brings a organization Gantt chart to our executive leadership team once a month. I will mention that this is a zoomed in version of the number of projects that we have going on right now, but it gives a really good picture of the high, medium, and low priority projects, how they line up against each other, and when are we going to deliver them across the enterprise.
And we slice and dice this by executive sponsor so that you can look at it like my CNO can look at her projects, but we also do a date, a chronological Gantt chart, so they can see where projects are across the span of time.
So lastly, a couple other things, we have to have a standardized way of tracking what we're doing so we make sure that we're hitting our deliverables. So you'll see again, templatized Gantt charts that we use in our project status reports. We'll use standardized minutes, action items, agendas. We make sure that when we're onboarding a new service line or new construction project, new location, we're utilizing an onboarding checklist, which over here on the bottom has every one of the segments in our organization, and then it's a hot link that says, what are the questions we need to ask you to make sure we're not missing something? This is a dynamic document. We are building a huge new office building and surgery center in Dillon, if you guys are familiar with it. There's a lot that goes into that. And if we miss something along the way, it has a big domino effect when we go to launch. So we created an onboarding checklist that helps us to close those gaps. We also, and actually from when I had showed the Gantt chart, we do use a software system called Airtable. It has our internal tracking system of all of our projects. We use them for our deliverables. And what's really cool is that we started it in IT. We've taken it on with a PMO, but we've now actually brought on 5 other segments that had nothing to do with project management in our organization, and they're now using it for their own internal stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So we're
resource allocation, project list, their own non-PM managed projects. So they're getting a lot, and you guys have probably worked with portfolio software. I used Microsoft Project, Microsoft Project Server, Airtable. So there's a variety of them. For the size of our organization, we went with this one. It's a little bit less intensive as far as hardware and software requirements.
So then we still have our change control requests, and my personal favorite is we actually took the time to brand ourselves. So we now have our own PMO logo, which we're very proud of. So yes. If you have the chance to do it, it's worth it. You can stamp it on every document. It's really fun. So lastly, to summarize kind of our journey and our story, Susan's going to give you a quick wrap up of, again, how are we proving our success in the short 8 months that we've been established as a PMO?
Mm-hmm. I have to say, next to my grandchildren, those templates are my favorite things in the world. They make things so consistent, so organized. The users love them. They know what they're getting, and they know what to expect. So Ashley's team has done an amazing job with our wash, rinse, and repeat philosophy. Templatize everything you can. It just makes our jobs much easier. So as Ashley mentioned, I'll take us through the last part of our presentation, which was really important. So we sold it. We identified who we needed, we figured out how to build it, we built it, and then we had to prove success, because how could I tie a bow around this and show our organization what you invested and what you let us invest in really brought value to the organization. So how do you prove success with your PMO? So again, transparency, communication, and visibility were our goals when we started out. And so what we do, as we mentioned, is our enterprise Gantt charts. We show tracking of our projects. We do segment meetings, status reports. I report out to the ELT. We also report to Leadership Council, which is directors and managers. So we're sharing this project information across the enterprise. And then my favorite, my CEO portfolio book, which I just love, Ashley and her team put together. It's a fabulous reading document. Again, we standardized. We did wash, rinse, and repeat everywhere we could. Templatize, templatize, templatize. From email templates down to status reports, project plans, make it standard. We did structured and standardized intake, approval, and execution processes. Again, we standardized and were consistent in our communication. You know, there's an old saying that Albert Einstein didn't know his phone number because he didn't need to. He could look it up in a phone book. The more you templatize for your project managers and for organization, the better off you'll be. And then finally, closed loop communication. So we take our projects once they're complete and we close them out. And by the way, we close them out one status reporting period after the project is closed and we've got an actual sign off from the customer. We take it back to the Project Governance Council and we have that business leader go and present their KPIs and their ROIs to show what they got was what they expected to get out of the project that they implemented. It kind of closes the loop. We got the value of our investment. So that's really important. And then we do top-down and bottom-up communication through the organization. And Ashley's team does bi-weekly status reports every other Friday, consistently, same format. Goes to via email to the stakeholders, then we review it in the segment meeting. So we're communicating and over-communicating. And then finally, project execution. Well, not finally, but next to finally, project execution. Our goal is to execute on time, in scope, and on budget. That's what we drive for. That's what project managers do. And then we do our after action review and lessons learned. It's super important, as we all know in the project management world, to be able to capture your lessons learned from your customers. Make your projects better, make the process smoother. So that's something that we implement, and it really works very well. That's what we have to present to you today. We are, as you can tell, very excited about this journey, very thankful for the opportunity to put this in place at Vail Health. I think it's been a game changer. My CEO says it's been a game changer. Our operational departments comment on it. So we get great feedback. I know from project management experience that we're driving for success.
We hope that you guys have enjoyed it. We would love to know if this is applicable to you and your organizations or where you might be in your journey, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions. We do have our
Hold on, let me bring
contact
it up.
information on the other slide that died on us, so we can certainly put that up there as well. But
Yeah, we'll share that. And Ashley and I can share, we're happy to share any of our templates, anything that you guys would like to see. I think as a project management community, we all learn from each other. Most of the stuff that we have, we didn't create ourselves. We use from other resources, getting information online. If I could, there we go. So that's got our email addresses on it. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share our journey and share anything that we've built. If you guys would like to collaborate, I think that's how we all make project management a better community.
and if any of you happen to be up in Vail, because we know it's a terrible place to come and visit, we don't mind you knocking on the door.
That's right.
So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, guys.